Her dress fell to the floor, but what rose that night was love she never expected. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The night was quiet except for the soft hum of the city lights spilling through the penthouse windows. Evelyn Hart stood in the middle of the marble floor, clutching her worn leather purse as if it were armor. She was 27, broke, and out of options. Behind the polished desk sat Adrian Vale, the youngest billionaire in New York, his expression calm, almost unreadable. "Marry me," he said, his voice low but steady. "Think of it as a contract." For a moment, Evelyn thought she had misheard him. The man across from her, CEO of Vale Industries, known for building empires and breaking competitors, could not possibly mean what he just said. "A contract," she repeated, her voice trembling. Adrian leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "You need money. I need stability. My board is pushing for a family image to secure the merger next quarter. 6 months. A legal marriage. No emotions, no obligations beyond what is written." He slid a folder across the desk. The embossed letters read, "Marriage Agreement, Confidential." Evelyn stared at it as if it might burn her fingers. Her mind raced her brother's hospital bills, the eviction notice on her door, the job she lost 2 weeks ago for standing up to a manager's harassment. She had nothing left except her pride, and even that was fading fast. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you are honest," Adrian said simply. "And because you have nothing to lose." The air between them tightened. The rain began to tap against the glass, slow and rhythmic, like a ticking clock waiting for her answer. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears. "This is insane," she muttered. "Maybe," he said, folding his hands. "But sometimes the insane choices are the only ones that work." She looked down at the folder again. Inside, the pages were dense with legal terms, but one clause stood out in bold: duration. 6 months. No intimacy required. No interference in personal matters. Termination upon mutual consent. It was everything he promised: cold, clean, transactional. Evelyn's reflection wavered in the glass tabletop. She saw the faint smear of tears she had tried to hide with cheap makeup, the exhaustion under her eyes, and something else: defiance. "If I sign this," she said softly, "you will cover my brother's treatment." Adrian nodded once. "Every cent. Up front." Her fingers tightened around the pen. The ink trembled slightly as she wrote her name, Evelyn Hart Vale, at the bottom of the page. When she lifted her gaze, Adrian was already watching her, not with victory but with something quieter. Pity, maybe. Curiosity. "Congratulations," he said, standing and offering his hand. "You are now Mrs. Vale." His palm was warm against hers, firm but not harsh. For the first time she realized that beneath the tailored suit and the reputation there was a man who carried his own silence like armor. As she left the office, the elevator mirrors reflected her new last name in gold letters on the document pressed to her chest. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, soaking through her coat, but she barely felt it. The deal was done. 6 months, she told herself. Just 6 months. What she did not know was that one night in that contract marriage, when her dress would fall to the floor, something unexpected would rise between them, something no paper clause could contain. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the faint sound of rain against the window. For a moment she forgot where she was. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender and linen, softer than anything she had ever owned. Then reality returned: the contract, the signature, and the fact that she was now Mrs. Vale, even if only on paper. A soft knock came at the door. "Mrs. Vale," a woman's voice said politely. "Mr. Vale's assistant sent me. We have fittings scheduled this morning." Evelyn sat up, blinking. "Fittings, yes, ma'am. You will need a wardrobe for the press announcement and the upcoming charity gala." 2 hours later, she found herself standing in front of a wall-length mirror while a stylist circled her with pins and fabric swatches. Silk, satin, beige, ivory. Every touch of fabric whispered luxury, yet she felt out of place among them, like an imposter in borrowed sunlight. When Adrian entered the room, the air changed. He wore a charcoal suit, crisp and simple, his presence commanding without effort. The stylist immediately stepped back. "You look different," he said. Evelyn looked at her reflection and then at him. Different or wrong, his lips curved slightly. Different can be good. He dismissed the staff with a nod, leaving the two of them alone. For a brief moment, silence filled the space between them, broken only by the ticking of the gold clock on the wall. "You do not have to do anything beyond what we agreed," Adrian said finally. "The gala this weekend is just part of the image. You smile, you stand beside me, and you let people believe what they want. And what exactly should they believe?" she asked quietly. "That we are in love." Her laugh was small but sharp. "You make it sound like a job description." He met her eyes without flinching. "In this world it is." That night she walked through the halls of the Vale residence, a mansion that felt more like a museum. The floors gleamed like mirrors, and every painting seemed to watch her. She found Adrian in his study reading by the fireplace. "I have been thinking," she said softly. "If people are going to believe we are married, we should at least know something about each other. Otherwise, they will see right through us." He closed the file in his hand. "Fair point. Ask what you want." Evelyn hesitated. "Why me? There are hundreds of women who would say yes without asking questions." His eyes flickered toward the flames. "Because they would do it for the cameras. You did it for survival. I respect that." She did not know what to say. For a second, the firelight softened his face, revealing something fragile behind the confidence, a trace of loneliness she did not expect. The weekend came faster than she hoped. The gala was held at a glass-domed ballroom downtown, its chandeliers glowing like stars. Photographers lined the carpet outside, flashes bursting like lightning as the luxury cars arrived. Evelyn's heart hammered as she stepped out beside Adrian, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The cameras shouted his name, then hers, and for the first time she realized what it meant to live in someone else's spotlight. Adrian leaned closer, his breath steady against her ear. "Smile. You are doing fine." Inside, music filled the air, strings, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses. Evelyn followed his lead, greeting strangers who looked her up and down with polite disbelief. Every gesture was a performance, the perfect wife, the composed smile, the gentle nod. Then in the middle of the crowd, a reporter's voice cut through the chatter. "Mr. Vale, rumor says this marriage was sudden. Was it love at first sight?" Evelyn froze. Adrian's hand found hers firm, reassuring. He looked straight into the cameras and said evenly, "Sometimes love does not ask for permission. It simply happens." For a moment, even the reporters went silent. The answer was too smooth, too practiced, and yet the way his thumb brushed her knuckles felt real. When the flashbulbs died down, Evelyn exhaled slowly. "You are a good actor," she whispered. Adrian turned slightly toward her. "So are you." Later that night, long after the guests had gone and the city lights had dimmed, Evelyn stood by the window of their shared suite. She had survived her first public test as Mrs. Vale, but what she could not explain was the faint ache in her chest, the strange warmth she felt when he held her hand before the cameras. It was supposed to be a job, a simple arrangement, yet somewhere between the lines of that contract, something else had begun to stir, something that made her wonder if pretending might become the most dangerous truth of all. The following week unfolded like a dream Evelyn could not quite believe she was living. Every morning began with the sound of heels clicking across marble floors and assistants greeting her as Mrs. Vale. Every evening ended with a table set for two, though more often than not Adrian was still buried in work when she went to bed. Their marriage was a schedule more than a relationship: photo sessions, business luncheons, charity meetings. Evelyn learned to smile at strangers who whispered behind glasses of champagne, wondering how a waitress had become the billionaire's wife. But inside, she kept count of every day left in their 6-month contract. One afternoon, she found herself in the study again, holding a list of upcoming events. "It says here I am attending the foundation dinner with you next week," she said, standing by the window. Adrian looked up from his laptop. "That one is important. The board members will be there. It is where you prove you belong." Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. "Prove? I thought this was supposed to be an illusion." He leaned back in his chair, calm as ever. "Illusions only work if they feel real." That answer followed her all week. It echoed when she practiced her speech with his publicist, when she sat through etiquette lessons on posture and conversation, when she stood in front of the mirror adjusting her pearl earrings. Somewhere in between, pretending to be perfect, she began to feel something she did not expect: respect. He never raised his voice. He never lied. Adrian kept his promises, every one of them. Her brother's hospital bills were paid. Her mother called to say the doctors were optimistic. For the first time in years, Evelyn's family had hope. The night of the foundation dinner arrived with the first snow of the season. The ballroom glittered in gold and white. Evelyn wore a pale blue gown that shimmered under the lights. When she stepped out of the car, she could hear the faint clicks of cameras and the murmur of guests. Adrian extended his hand. Ready as I will ever be," she replied. Inside, everything moved in slow motion. The orchestra played softly. The air smelled of roses and fine wine. Adrian guided her from one circle of investors to another, introducing her as his wife. His tone never wavered, his posture steady and protective. For the first time, she was not acting. She was part of his world. Then came the speech. Adrian stood on stage, the spotlight washing over him, his expression focused. "Tonight," he said, "we celebrate those who turn power into purpose." He paused, his gaze drifting to Evelyn. "And I would like to thank my wife, Evelyn Vale, for reminding me what purpose truly looks like." The applause that followed was thunderous. Evelyn felt her cheeks burn, her heart tightening with something she could not name. When the lights dimmed and the guests began to mingle again, she slipped away to the terrace for air. Snowflakes touched her shoulders like cold feathers. Escaping already, Adrian's voice came from behind her. She smiled faintly without turning. "You make speeches sound like confessions." "Only when they are," he said quietly. Their eyes met. For a moment the noise of the ballroom faded, leaving only the rhythm of falling snow and the distance between them. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. It was a simple gesture, but it felt far too intimate for a marriage built on paper. Evelyn stepped back slightly, her pulse quickening. "You should not look at me that way," she whispered. "And how is that? Like it means something." He did not answer. Instead, he offered his arm again. "Come inside. You will freeze." Back in the ballroom, the music changed to something slower, gentler. Couples began to move to the center of the floor. Before she could refuse, Adrian held out his hand. "One dance," he said. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was steady, warm. They moved together beneath the chandeliers, her head close enough to catch the scent of cedar and rain on his suit. "This was not part of the contract," she murmured. "No," he said softly, "but neither was the way you make this place feel alive." The words lingered long after the song ended. When she finally stepped away, her heart was no longer pretending. Something real had begun to grow, quiet but unstoppable, like snow melting into the first sign of spring. The days after the foundation dinner passed in quiet confusion for Evelyn. Something had shifted between them that night. Something neither of them could name. The dance had ended, but its echo followed her everywhere, the warmth of his hand, the way he had looked at her when the world faded away. Every morning she told herself it was still a contract. Every night she caught herself wondering if Adrian thought about it too. Winter deepened. The city outside their penthouse glimmered with frost and lights. Inside, Evelyn tried to stay busy, reading, sketching, helping Adrian's team organize charity drives. Yet she could feel him watching her, sometimes silently, as if searching for something he could not admit he wanted. One evening she found him in the study again, the same place where they had signed their agreement months earlier. The fire burned low shadows dancing across his face. "You are working late again," she said softly. He looked up from a stack of papers. "It is easier than sleeping." She smiled faintly. "You sound like a man who has everything but rest." Adrian leaned back, setting his pen aside. "You would be surprised how little everything is worth when it keeps you alone." The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. She had seen him command boardrooms, face down rivals, but never like this, unguarded, almost vulnerable. "Tell me something," she asked after a pause. "When this is over, when the 6 months end, what happens then?" He hesitated. "You go back to your life. I go back to mine. And do we pretend none of this ever happened? That is what we agreed." Evelyn nodded, though her chest ached at the words. Then maybe the agreement was a mistake. Adrian's eyes met hers. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but it is the first mistake I do not regret." For a long moment neither of them moved. The air seemed to hum between them, soft and electric. Then the lights flickered. The storm outside had grown stronger. Thunder rolled across the skyline, and rain began to lash against the windows. "You should change," he said, standing. "The balcony doors are not sealed properly. The temperature will drop." Evelyn turned toward the hall, but a sudden crack of thunder made her jump. The power went out. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the glow of the fireplace. "Do not move," Adrian said. "I will check the generator." But before he could take a step, she tripped over the edge of the rug, catching herself against the back of his chair. The sudden motion pulled them close, too close. Her breath brushed his collar. His hand came up instinctively to steady her. "Sorry," she whispered. "It is fine," he said, but his voice was no longer steady. The firelight shimmered over them. She could feel the heat of his body, the scent of cedar and rain again. The silence stretched, and something unspoken filled it. Want, fear, truth. Her fingers brushed his sleeve before she could stop herself. The fabric was warm alive. "Adrian," she began, but the rest of her words dissolved when he lifted his hand, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You do not have to be afraid," he said quietly. "I am not," she answered, though her pulse said otherwise. And then for one fragile second the distance between them disappeared. The contract, the rules, the walls, they all fell away like her dress that slipped from her shoulders, moments later pooling softly at her feet. Outside the storm raged. Inside time stood still. There was no wealth, no power, no pretense. Only two people who had spent too long pretending not to feel. Later, when the thunder faded and dawn began to color the sky, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, the world silent around her. Adrian was asleep beside her, peaceful in a way she had never seen. She watched him for a long time, realizing that somewhere in the quiet between duty and desire she had fallen in love with the man behind the contract. She reached for the folded paper on the nightstand, their original agreement. Her name stared back at her in black ink, clear and final. 6 months. No intimacy required, no emotions involved. But as she looked at him sleeping, she knew that rule had already been broken. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving the city wrapped in quiet silver light. Evelyn woke first. The world outside the window glowed with snow, but inside the room everything was still too still. Adrian was already awake, sitting by the window with a cup of coffee, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned slightly, nodding once. "Morning." His voice was calm, but it carried a distance she had not heard before. Evelyn sat up, the sheets gathered around her. "About last night, there is no need to explain." Adrian interrupted gently. "It was an emotional night. Let us not overthink it." His words stung more than she expected. For him it was logic. For her it was something else entirely. She forced a faint smile. "Of course. It will not happen again." He looked at her then, just long enough for her to see the flicker of regret in his eyes, before he stood and left the room. The next few days blurred together. Adrian buried himself in meetings. Evelyn attended charity visits, always smiling for the cameras, always keeping her voice steady. The gossip columns called them the perfect couple, but inside, a cold wall had grown between them. One evening, as she reviewed event notes in the office, Adrian's assistant rushed in. "Mrs. Vale, we have a situation. A journalist got hold of a private photo." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What kind of photo?" The assistant hesitated, then handed her a tablet. On the screen was a picture taken through the glass windows of their penthouse, the faint outline of two figures in each other's arms. The headline read, "The Billionaire's Secret Marriage Real or PR Stunt." By the time Adrian arrived, damage control was already in motion. "Public relations is handling it," he said, scanning the article. "We deny intimacy. It keeps the board calm." Her throat tightened. "Deny intimacy. It is just business," he said flatly. "If we confirm it, investors will think the merger was emotional. It cannot look that way. So last night never happened, officially or otherwise." Her voice trembled, but she refused to look away. Adrian set the tablet down, his jaw tightening. "Evelyn, this is not about feelings. This is about control." She stepped back, her heart pounding. "Then you have won. You have all the control you want." That night, Evelyn packed a small suitcase. The snow outside had turned to rain again, soft and cold. She left the penthouse quietly, not leaving a note, not taking anything that was not hers. For the first time in months, she breathed without the weight of expectation. But with every step away from that building, the ache in her chest grew heavier. 2 days later, the media frenzy worsened. Reporters camped outside Vale Industries. The board demanded statements, and for the first time Adrian faced something he could not solve with strategy silence. Evelyn was gone, and he had no idea where she went. In her small rented apartment on the other side of the city, Evelyn watched the news alone. His face appeared on every screen, calm and composed as always. Yet when he said the words, "My marriage remains professional," something inside her broke completely. She turned off the television, her eyes filling with tears. The contract had always promised distance, but she had foolishly hoped for something real. Outside, thunder rumbled again in the distance. She whispered to herself, 6 months or not, it is over. What she did not know was that Adrian was staring at the same storm from his office window, holding the torn edge of the contract she had left behind, realizing too late that in trying to protect his empire he had destroyed the only thing that was real. Weeks passed, but to Adrian each day felt longer than the one before. The penthouse was silent now, no soft footsteps in the morning, no quiet laughter echoing down the hall. He had everything he had ever worked for. The merger approved the board, satisfied the company's value higher than ever. Yet the victory felt hollow, like a stage left empty after the curtain had fallen. He tried to tell himself it was better this way, that their arrangement had simply run its course. But every time he looked at the empty side of the dining table, the words "just business" rang false. One night, unable to sleep, Adrian found himself in the study. On the desk sat the original contract folded neatly beside a framed photo from the foundation dinner. Evelyn's smile glowed and the camera flashed genuine, not practiced. He traced her name on the paper with his thumb, realizing what he had lost. The next morning he called his assistant. "Find her," he said simply. "No press, no team, no explanation. I just need to know she is safe." It took 3 days. She had rented a small apartment near the hospital where her brother was recovering. When Adrian's car stopped in front of the modest building, he sat for a long time before stepping out. For the first time in years, he was nervous. Evelyn opened the door before he could knock twice. Her eyes widened. "Adrian." He nodded. "May I come in?" The room was small, but warm books on the table, a pot of soup simmering on the stove. It was a world far from the marble and glass of his penthouse, but somehow more alive. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "I know." He hesitated. "But I needed to be." Evelyn folded her arms, guarding herself. "What do you want?" He took a slow breath. "To tell you that I was wrong. About everything." She shook her head. "No, you were right. It was business. You kept your word and I kept mine." "That night was not business," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "Neither was the way you made my house feel like home. I was too afraid to admit that." Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she looked away. "You are saying this now because you lost control. That is what you hate most." Maybe, he admitted, but for the first time, losing control feels like the only thing that makes sense. The silence between them stretched. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the window pane. He stepped closer, holding out a small envelope. "I started something new," he said softly. "The Second Chance Foundation. In your name, for families who cannot afford treatment like your brother's." Her breath caught. "Why would you do that?" "Because you once told me people deserve a chance to start over," he said. "I think I do too." Evelyn looked at the envelope, then at him. For a long moment neither moved. Then she whispered, "You cannot buy forgiveness, Adrian." "I am not trying to," he replied. "I am asking for one." The rain outside grew heavier, filling the silence between them. And though she did not answer, her eyes softened, the first sign of something fragile rebuilding itself. When he finally left, she watched him disappear into the rain. Her heart was still cautious, but hope, quiet and persistent, had found its way back in. She touched the envelope in her hand, knowing that this was not the end of their story, only the beginning of something real. 2 weeks later, Evelyn returned to her normal routine. She spent her mornings at the hospital with her brother and her afternoons helping at the local community center. Life was quieter, smaller, but it was real. She cooked her own meals, walked home under the streetlights, and tried not to think about the man she had left behind. But forgetting Adrian Vale was impossible. His name appeared in the news almost every day, his company thriving, his public image spotless. Yet in every photo, Evelyn noticed the same thing: the light in his eyes was gone. One evening she stopped by the hospital cafeteria to grab coffee. The television above the counter was tuned to the business channel. A reporter announced Vale Industries will host a public charity gala next week to launch the Second Chance Foundation. Evelyn froze. On the screen, Adrian stood behind a podium speaking calmly to the press. "Every success story," he said, "deserves a second chance. This foundation is dedicated to those who fight quietly, who believe that compassion is stronger than profit." Then he paused. "And this project would not exist without the woman who taught me that lesson." He did not say her name, but the look in his eyes told the world who he meant. Evelyn set her cup down slowly. Her heart was racing. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at her apartment. No name, just a simple card inside. It read, "If you can please come, No reporters, no cameras. Just you. The address was the same hotel ballroom where they had once danced together under the chandeliers. The night of the gala, Evelyn stood outside the building, snow falling lightly around her. She almost turned back twice, but something, perhaps the sound of music drifting from the hall, pulled her forward. Inside, the atmosphere was elegant yet warmer than before. Instead of investors and executives, the room was filled with doctors, families, and volunteers. Banners for the Second Chance Foundation lined the walls. At the center of the stage stood Adrian, holding a small microphone, his expression steady but searching. He spotted her near the back, and for a brief second the room seemed to fade. He took a deep breath and began his speech. "I used to believe success meant control," he said, "that the only way to protect what I built was to never feel anything deeply. Then I met someone who proved me wrong. She challenged me, argued with me, cared enough to walk away when I was too proud to listen." The audience was silent. Adrian continued, his voice low but firm. "Tonight I want to honor that woman. She reminded me that love, like leadership, is not about ownership. It is about courage." He gestured to the banner behind him. "This foundation carries her name because she gave me mine back, the part of me that still believes in people." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since she left, she saw not the CEO but the man who had learned to love without condition. When the applause began, Adrian stepped off the stage and walked straight toward her. The crowd parted. He stopped, just in front of her, close enough that she could see the nervousness hiding behind his calm smile. "I meant every word," he said softly. "I did not bring you here for publicity. I brought you here because I cannot stand another day without you." Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens if I say yes?" He smiled faintly. "Then we start again. No contracts, no rules, just us." The music swelled around them. For the first time in months, Evelyn let herself breathe. She nodded slowly, and Adrian took her hand steady, certain real. In that moment the gala, the lights, and the noise disappeared. There was only forgiveness found in the quiet space between two people who had finally stopped pretending. The applause from the crowd faded into a soft hum as Adrian guided Evelyn toward the side of the stage. Cameras flashed in the distance, but the noise felt far away, like echoes from another life. For the first time since they met, there was no contract, no performance, only truth hanging in the air between them. Evelyn looked up at him, her voice barely steady. "You really did all of this?" "For me," Adrian nodded. "For us," he said quietly. "But mostly because I needed to become the kind of man you believed I could be." She blinked away, the tears forming in her eyes. "You could have just called." He gave a small smile. "You would not have answered." It was true, and they both knew it. Still, the sound of his voice, soft, grounded, sincere, broke through the walls she had spent months rebuilding. A woman from the foundation approached them with a microphone. "Mr. Vale, the press would like one last photo with Mrs. Vale for the record." Adrian looked at Evelyn for permission. She hesitated, then nodded. Together they walked to the front of the stage. The audience watched as the man once known for his icy control placed his arm around her shoulders. The flashbulbs captured not a business arrangement but something raw and human. After the photo, Adrian leaned close and whispered, "Come with me. There is something I need to show you." They slipped out through a side door into the cold night air. Snowflakes drifted under the soft glow of the street lamps as they walked to a nearby park, the same one where Evelyn used to sketch before their worlds collided. At the center stood a small bronze plaque covered with a white cloth. Adrian stopped in front of it and handed her the corner of the cloth. "Go ahead," he said. She pulled it away slowly. The words engraved on the metal caught the light: "The Second Chance Pavilion, dedicated to those who believed love can rebuild anything." Below it, smaller letters read, "In honor of Evelyn Hart Vale." Evelyn covered her mouth, overcome. "Adrian, this is your idea," he said softly. "You once told me that the world does not need more success stories. It needs stories of redemption. I wanted people to remember that." She turned to him, her eyes wet. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will give me another chance," he said, his voice quiet but steady. The snow fell harder, dusting his shoulders and dark hair. Evelyn looked at him, the man who had once treated love like a contract, now standing in the cold, asking not for forgiveness but for hope. "I spent months trying to forget you," she whispered. "But the truth is I never could." Adrian reached for her hand, his touch gentle. Then let us stop running from what we both already know. For a long moment they stood in silence as snow gathered around their feet. Finally Evelyn nodded. All right, she said softly. No more pretending. He exhaled relief washing over his face. No more pretending, he repeated. She smiled faintly. But next time you need to prove something, no more grand speeches, no more headlines. He laughed quietly. Deal. The wind picked up swirling snowflakes around them like confetti. Beneath the park lights their hands remained clasped, two lives no longer bound by paper but by something far stronger, the courage to start again. And for the first time Evelyn believed that maybe the story that began as a contract could finally become the truth they both had been searching for. Spring came quietly that year. The snow melted into clear streams that ran along the park paths, and the trees outside the Vale Foundation headquarters began to bloom with soft pink petals. It had been 3 months since the gala, the night Evelyn and Adrian decided to begin again. Life between them was different now. There were no schedules, no photo shoots, no meetings dictated by contracts. Adrian still worked hard, but he no longer disappeared behind office doors. He often joined Evelyn at the foundation where she organized outreach programs and spoke to families who reminded her of her own beginnings. Sometimes she would look up from a meeting room and see him standing by the window sleeves rolled up quietly watching her. It was no longer the gaze of a man assessing risk. It was a man in love learning to stay. One Saturday morning Evelyn woke to the smell of coffee and sunlight spilling through the curtains. Adrian was in the kitchen, still in his white shirt from the night before, sleeves creased, hair slightly messy. You are up early, she said, smiling. He turned, handing her a mug. Big day. You forgot, did you not? She frowned. What is today? He gave her that small half smile she had come to recognize. The board meeting for the foundation and the day I planned to make a very unprofessional announcement. Evelyn laughed. You are not supposed to warn me before you do something reckless. Then pretend you did not hear it, he said. That afternoon the foundation hall was filled with staff, reporters, and families. Cameras flashed as Adrian stepped up to the podium, but this time there was no nervousness in his voice. 3 years ago he began. I believed that love and business could never coexist. I believed that control was strength and vulnerability was weakness. Then someone came into my life and proved me wrong. He looked toward Evelyn, who stood near the front row, her hands folded tightly. Evelyn Hart Vale taught me that leadership is not about perfection, it is about compassion. She built this foundation from an idea I once dismissed as impossible, and today I want to make that official. He stepped down from the stage, reaching into his pocket. The hall went silent. Evelyn's breath caught when he stopped in front of her holding a small velvet box. Evelyn, he said softly, the first time you said yes, it was for survival. The second time, I hope it is for love. Her eyes filled with tears. You already know the answer, she whispered. Adrian smiled and opened the box. Inside was not the diamond ring the world would expect, but a simple silver band engraved with one line, "No rules, only love." She nodded, her voice shaking. Yes. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed again, but this time neither of them cared. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close. No contracts, he murmured against her hair. No contracts, she repeated. Just us. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, they walked together through the same park where he had built the pavilion in her name. The bronze plaque glowed in the fading light, and the words beneath it seemed to take on new meaning. Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you ever think about how strange it all was, how it started? Adrian smiled faintly. Every day. And I would not change a single moment. She looked up at him, warmth in her eyes. Not even the contract, he chuckled softly. Especially the contract. It brought me to you. As they stood beneath the soft hum of the city, the wind lifted the last petals from the trees, scattering them around their feet like white confetti. Her dress swayed gently in the breeze, no longer a symbol of the night she thought would break her, but of the life she had rebuilt from it. And when Adrian kissed her slow and certain, she knew the truth at last. Her dress had fallen once, but her heart had finally found where it was meant to stay.